So welcome everybody to this
欢迎
panel
大家。
presentation. Oh, I think someone's off mute. So welcome to this panel presentation on how the arts, science, and media can
欢迎来
support,
到我们的
thank you, can support neo-humanism. My name is Rebecca Moan. I am joined today on this panel with Enrique Cunha, Igor Amin, and Dr. Michael Towsey, although I found out earlier today that Michael is traveling through the Australian outback. And so he sent his slides, he sent his talk to me. And then I also quickly put together a little something more about his topic. So I want to go through an overview of what we're going to be learning on this panel today. First off, I'm going to talk about the interplay between science, the arts, and media. Why do we even have a panel about this in the first place? So you'll hear about that. Next, I will talk about how the media, as well as literature, can promote and hamper the spread of
今天的主
neo-humanism.
题分享呢，主要是4个，主要以下几点。
Can
第一
you
个呢，就
mute
是
Radhika,
关
please?
于
Yes, just one
Yeah.
moment.
Thank you. So then you will hear
关于
examples
科
of
学、艺术以及媒体。
neo-humanism in music by Enrique Cunha. And then we will have a performance that mixes storytelling, music, and visual effects by Igor Amin. Then we'll hear about the relationship between neo-humanism and science by Dr. Michael Towsey. And then we will have questions and answers. So first off, how do all of these things connect? Well, I think it goes back to this saying by English poet John Donne, "No man is an island." That's him on the left there. Just as no man is an island, neither are artists or scientists. An artist relies on media and vice versa. Journalists write about an art exhibit or a new musician or a new film, for instance. And furthermore, every creation is amplified by the addition of another art form. Journalists add pictures or sound bites to their stories. Musicians create music videos. Even authors rely on cover design and graphic design for the interior of the book. We have that saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover." Well, honestly, everybody judges a book by its cover. And that means that cover design is very important for even something like a book that's all words. And also within the book, there's a whole mechanism to create the interior so that it is aesthetically pleasing. And on top of that, we carry our experiences, our perspectives, and our beliefs with us when we create something new. So truly, there is no objectivity. And so that means one way or another, a certain message is going to be delivered. Artists and scientists synthesize things they've read, heard, or experienced. Being an artist means... Can you do some muting again for me? Thank you. Thank you. Being an artist means acting as a bridge between the self and another. Being a scientist means explaining the world around us to unlock its secrets. So if artists and scientists do all of this, they synthesize information and act as bridges, why not make the message a neo-humanist one? So first of all, why should you even listen to me? I graduated with a degree in journalism from American University in 2006. I've worked for trade publications ever since then. But additionally, I've freelanced for general news outlets as well. I've written for tinybuddha.com and the Elephant Journal. In 2012, I published a memoir called Just a Girl from Kansas. For the past 12 years, I've written once a week, every week in my blog called Another World is Probable. Some of you might be subscribers even on this Zoom call with us today. And most recently, I finished a novel that I'm shopping around to literary agents. So when it comes to writing, at least, I know what I'm talking about. And because I have experience in this industry, I want to explain to you why you don't often see new humanistic stories being reported on. When journalists and editors decide what to write about, they use newsworthiness criteria. The question is this something readers will want to know? And they use the following criteria to determine that. So the first rule is timeliness. Is this new? Is it current? There's nothing worse than old news in the media business. The second rule or criteria is prominence. People want to read about prominent figures in the government or other celebrities. If I break my arm, that won't appear in the paper. But if the Queen of England breaks her arm, that's front page news. The third criteria of newsworthiness is this old journalism saying, if it bleeds, it leads. That means the most bloody, gruesome things are reported on. It could be the bombing of an embassy or a school shooting. In fact, you'll notice that in this picture of the New York Times, that the headline we can read says, "Teenager's Path and a Killing Put Spotlight on Mental Care." The fourth criteria of or rule of newsworthiness is if it's unusual or out of the ordinary. We never read that a cat made it home in time for dinner. It's always something unexpected, even in the good news section. For instance, pregnant wife saves husband from shark attack. That was a real story, by the way. Other things that are covered in the news are anniversaries and debuts. So for instance, the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, or the first annual dinner honoring women in medicine. As you can see in this image, it was reported on the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and also awards, the Grammys, the Oscars, Nobel Prize. If something is deemed award-winning, typically the media will cover it. So then the question becomes, why even do these criteria exist? Why do we have newsworthiness? Fundamentally, it's to get eyeballs on the page. It's to get people to watch or to listen. And all of that is done in service of ad revenue. As long as media is run like a business, it's very difficult to make it neo-humanist. Neo-humanism seeks to break down walls, to build bridges, to see yourself in someone who doesn't look like you, think like you, talk like you, and not only humans, but also have you identify with plants and animals as well. Neo-humanism seeks to promote care and concern for all beings. So you can again recognize that no man is an island. So I know I was just kind of doom and gloom there about media, but it is possible to make the media neo-humanistic. Here are some suggestions that I have. The first one is to stop tying revenue to page views, subscribers, viewers, etc. If the bottom line is no longer profit, then all important stories can be told. And we won't have sites like Infowars.com or journalists who are stars. Maybe we'll have some of that, but I don't think we'll have as much of it because there will be not so much of an emphasis on making money. And instead, there will be this idea of service. My other suggestion is to make the media a cooperative.
Es hacer a los medios.
Can you mute again?
Pardon me, just for a moment. Sorry to interrupt. Excuse me. I think we are having just a tad bit of technical interruption with our interpretation module. So I just want to check in real briefly if we're okay with the Spanish interpretation.
You can put me instead of Talia.
Oh,
if you need
okay.
to.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what is happening.
No, I apologize. You're going through this. We know you want to help. So,
I'm sorry.
all right. And Ronnie, I think you're good to go now.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'm sorry. Back to you, Rebecca.
Okay, picking it back up. And if at any point you can't hear me or I need to go slower, please just put that into the chat. So my next suggestion is to make the media a cooperative. For newspapers, many years ago, they were owned by a person called a publisher. And these days, newspapers are owned by companies. So for instance, Amazon owns the Washington Post. And because ownership is so far removed from the newsroom floor, very often the decisions are not in the best interest of the employees. Instead, there's a focus on cutting costs to boost profit. If journalists own the paper or radio show or news channel, they would have a clear understanding of how to operate. My other suggestion is to have citizens fund media. If every citizen paid a small tax, journalists be beholden to the citizens or residents and not to advertisers. Journalists could report on stories without fear of losing their jobs or funding. Also, the UK already does something like this. The BBC is funded principally by an annual license fee that's charged to all British households, companies, and organizations. And if you'll notice, the BBC is a great source for news. So, you know, I've been kind of bashing the media in this panel, but there are examples of neo-humanism in the news if you know where to look. So primarily, you should look in the feature article section, the opinion section, and the essay section, as well as the good news section too. The articles that are in these sections are called evergreens because they're timeless. There's no need to publish them right away. They can run at any time. And these stories, they stir the heartstrings and remind you that people are primarily good. These stories remind you other people have feelings, hopes, and dreams. They place you in the shoes of other people. So here are some of my favorite pieces in the past several years. In 2016, New York Public Radio did a wonderful series on poverty called Busted, America's Poverty Myths. And they addressed poverty myths like poor people are lazy. In fact, poor people are not lazy. Usually they're working multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. And they're doing whatever they can to make money, like donating plasma. The series also discusses the truth behind the rags to riches story. It's a myth, and how usually it's not true, that it's an exception. Usually people become wealthy because they have help from relatives or another unnamed source. And I also want to mention here that race frequently plays a role. If you're Black or brown, it's so much harder to accumulate wealth. And I think that Lydia addressed this earlier in her presentation today, at least some of it. So what I really like about this series is that it puts a face to poverty. These stories look at people who are often overlooked, and they stir compassion, which is a key element in neo-humanism. Another one of my favorite pieces comes from this year. In May, The Guardian published an article about a real-life Lord of the Flies. That's that top image over here. For those of you who don't know, the novel by William Golding, Lord of the Flies, focuses on a group of British boys stranded on an uninhabited island and discusses their disastrous attempt to govern themselves. The boys become competitive and warlike, and they kill 3 people in their party. And this bottom image over here shows a still from the film version that came out many years ago. So in the real life version of The Lord of the Flies, 6 boys set out from Tonga on a fishing trip and were marooned for more than a year. And instead of devolving into chaos and aggression, they took care of one another and acted cooperatively. In fact, one of the boys broke his leg, and the other boys took care of him. When he was able to get checked out by a doctor, the physician marveled that the boy's leg was perfectly healed. More often than not, we help each other out in large and small ways. This news story illustrates that. Because we're talking about literature, let's just keep talking about literature. I want to explain why I think it's hard to find neo-humanistic literature that's modern. That's typically because most modern literature focuses on the importance of identity and groups. In fact, in publishing, there's a movement called Own Voices that seeks to amplify minority storytellers and have people from certain cultures tell their own stories. I just want to be clear here that I want that to happen. I think it's so important to have diverse voices in literature. We can't just have books that are written by white men, but the question for me is whether the literature shows a shared humanity. Does it illustrate the common thread that links all of us together or not? Does the book help you identify with people who don't look like you, act like you, think like you? If it does that, then it's neo-humanistic. So, two books that I think do this very well are To Kill a Mockingbird and Stargirl. To Kill a Mockingbird is a book by Harper Lee. Many of you on this Zoom call may have already read it. It's required reading in most schools in the United States. The book addresses the themes of tolerance and prejudice. Lawyer Atticus Finch defends the falsely accused Black man, Tom Robinson. And Scout, the book's narrator, she's saved from an attack by angry white men who are upset about Atticus Finch defending this Tom Robinson, and they try to attack Scout, the narrator, and she's saved by this reclusive neighbor named Boo. I appreciate this book because it really stirs compassion for people that are considered outsiders. Similarly, there's a book called Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. It's a young adult book that focuses on the quirky Stargirl, who is first teased and then she's embraced, and that acceptance changes her classmates. And in fact, Disney made a movie about this, and I'm going to show you the trailer for it now because I think it's fun, and why not? So let's see. Just give me a second for it to start here. A little bit of a lag. Okay.
Excuse me, Rebecca. I think when you're sharing, can you check to see if the sound is enabled, and just maybe unstop sharing and then reshare? And there's a little button in the left-hand corner that says share sound. So.
Yes. Okay.
But before we talk about her, I have to tell.
Is it playing now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Krishna Priya, the author of Stargirl, is Jerry Spinelli. So I'm gonna keep playing this now.
Tell you something about me. When I was 9.
My video going to play this. All right.
We moved to Mica, Arizona. As the new kid, I became the center of attention real fast. And not in a good way. It was then that I realized I was gonna need to disappear. No one would see me. No one would hear me. I was gonna have to be just like everybody else. And then, one day.
When some loud bragger tries to put me down.
What's your name anyway?
Stargirl. My name is Stargirl. So be true to your school now.
You should talk to her. She likes you. She doesn't.
Be true to your school now.
You like Stargirl. I don't really know her. But maybe if you did, you might.
Won't you let me walk you home from school? Mom, were you ever afraid of what people thought of you?
Figuring out who we are is the one thing no one else can do for us.
Won't you let me meet you at the pool?
Did you want to ask me something?
If it's so, well, let me know. Sometimes I'm quiet, but I'm just thinking.
Scream, Leo.
Why would I do that?
Don't you want the universe to hear you?
Since she got here, things have been different.
Some people are just like that.
Being with you is the most anyone has ever looked at me in my entire life. There's just something about her. She's not like anyone else. Is she magic?
You think things have to be real, more magic. But the best things are both.
Okay. Next slide. All right. Hope you enjoyed that. So honestly, I find that nonfiction more easily portrays neo-humanism because the natural world has countless examples of cooperation and care. And not only for people, but for plants too. There's this great book called The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. And he explains how trees communicate with one another. They have a support network that sends nutrients to sick or struggling trees. It's such a fascinating book. I highly recommend it. So why even make neo-humanistic literature? Art and media are powerful because people have their guards down when they're consuming this. They're more open. That means that it's all the more important to create art and media that moves the world to a more fair, just, equitable, loving, and kind place. Art and media influence us, whether we want to believe that's true or not. And if you watch the film The Social Dilemma, you'll see how true that is.
You.
So The Social Dilemma is incredibly chilling. And I think that it also speaks to what I've been referencing, is how when you have media that's focused on profit, this is the result. There was one study that one of the speakers mentioned coming out of MIT, that false information spreads 6 times faster than true information. And that's because it's interesting and there's a profit associated with it. And so if this is happening, then the question for me is, what can I do as an artist to actually create a world that I want to see? So, because again, no man is an island, no artist, no scientist is an island. We are not objective people as much as some of us would like to believe we are. So if you're going to have an agenda anyway, why not make it neo-humanist? So when I am creating as an artist, I ask myself, what am I creating and why? If I want it to be neo-humanistic, then I need to focus on creating something for the good of humanity, something that focuses on collective welfare or opens the heart. So with that in mind, I want to leave you with this quote for inspiration by Sri P.R. Sarkar, the founder of neo-humanism. He said, "In every expression, in every stratum of this universe, however crude or subtle, only one refrain prevails. And that refrain is the attainment of bliss. In that artistic movement toward welfare, both the attainment and the bestowal of happiness find simultaneous expression. When literateurs dedicate themselves to the service or practice of literature, They have to let their creative genius flow in this very current. They have to cleanse all that is turbid, all that is inauspicious in individual life in the holy waters of their universal mentality, and then convey it sweetly and gracefully into the heart of humanity. And so, having said all of that, I'm now going to turn over the panel to our next presenter, Enrique Cunha, who is undergoing a music therapy graduate course in Brazil. He also has a bachelor's degree in business administration. He currently acts as the associate student delegate for the World Federation of Music Therapy for Latin America and the Caribbean. He's the campus student rep for the course and is working on a scientific initiation program for his second year with the subject Music Therapy and the Elder. He acted in extension projects on education and with music therapy research on the Public Education Network. He is always striving for collective development and using resources in a balanced, equipoise manner. Enrique, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And yeah, so good night, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever you are. There's something that fits, I'm sure. So sharing my screen here, I believe you can see it. So the topic I'll be presenting, I'd like to actually make an exercise with you. And it is, and please, I'm with the chat open up right here. So if I'm speaking too fast, if I'm going too slow, or if you would like me to speak louder, please tell me. What the exercise I would like to do is to collectively assume a new humanistic perspective. And how come, how could we do that? So we're going to do that through analysis and interpretation of some music and arts created in the Brazilian scenario. So we will jump on and off from Portuguese when the pieces come. Rebecca has made quite a good introduction of myself, but I'd like, if we want to assume a new humanistic perspective, you need to know where you are and who you are, and in that the philosophical question, right? We've been through a whole day looking for all of the kinds of explanations to that question, who we are in essence, but one with everyone. So scratch that question. Let's not ask ourselves, who am I? Let's say, what brought me here? I think this is the neo-humanistic way to see and how our individuals, they can create something better together. It's different than saying, oh, look at this guy, Enrique, he does this and that, and he's doing that. So he is that. Do I have a bachelor? Am I a student? Or am I going through a process of study? So yeah, I'm an undergraduate in music therapy. Music therapy is actually a course, and which is a discipline, a transdisciplinary discipline in the scientific methodology. So graduation courses in music therapy, they are rare around the globe. They happen mainly here in Brazil and some in Latin America, and you have some in Europe. And music therapy as a discipline, like psychology, is pretty brand new. It comes from the Second Great War and in between. And so that was a time where it started to blossom. Here is a little picture of an ethnomusicology study that we did in Paranaguá. It's a city nearby the city where I live in. And this instrument I'm playing is called the rabecão. In English, there is an equivalent. It will be a big Rebecca, or it looks like a double bass, but it really isn't. It's like a predecessor of those, and they use this on their ensembles there. And also I'm on that university research program, and I receive a scholarship for that, which unfortunately here in Brazil are ceasing to exist in the next year. So I was very fortunate to get the last 2 years where it is working, but for this specific program, they're going to be cut due to new education policies. And as mentioned, I do study music therapy and the elder. So here is a little picture that I'll talk a little further more. I also, because of my enrollment on the university, I ended up being delegated as the student representative for Latin America and the Caribbean on the World Federation of Music Therapy. And that puts me in a perspective of seeing how music therapy is being done all around the globe, and how different areas, how different countries, how different universities deal with it, and how the practices are done, and to which public and with what kind of enforcement they're done. Because music therapy can go many ways, as in education, as in neuro rehabilitation, rehab to those with specific neurological conditions, and on social areas, and so on. So we have different strategies of that all around the globe too. Also, I am what people say a musician. So I don't say I compose music. I usually download them after my practices. And here is an example of that. Not of me downloading anything, but a practice of musicianship. So this is an event called Círculo do Som Sagrado. That's Sacred Circle of Sound, Circle of Secrets, of Sacred Sound. And it's an ensemble, and in the middle we do mandalas with flowers, with fruits, with candles and everything, and people meditate together in the circle, and we read philosophy quotes, we read poetry, and there's this ensemble and surrounding the circle, which produces sounds to the center, and we play chants, music, popular music, all trying to connect with the theme that we're trying to portray, and people meditate together. At the end, everyone is singing with their hands up high. You know how it goes. Also a poet because I write some lyrics, so you have to write down what you think. But that doesn't make me any different. Actually, that's the opposite. And this picture is here to exemplify that. So I had the grace to participate on the opening of a yoga space in January of this very year. And one of the workshops that I did. So both of these pictures atop here, and the first one that appeared on this circle with this beautiful green grass and trees, they are workshops, and I work with these workshops. I do musical experiences to have people accommodate certain feelings, and to have certain stimuli bring people together, or maybe bring people inwards and such. As a kid, I always had the dream of being a musician, but I never saw the need or the perfect reason to perform and learn music in front of a stage. But being side by side with people and seeing them produce things makes me really, really happy and realized. So this picture here with the purple floor that I said was in a yoga instruction place that I was in the inauguration, we actually composed the song. It's over 30 people here. We made different groups, and we conduced a little kind of visualization with music playing in the background. So I played it on the guitar, acoustic guitar, which is my main instrument. We have some instruments scattered around, so people that would like to get involved into the music making with instrument, they can grab those, or even if, I don't know, someone is feeling kind of ashamed to sing, they may do that as well to participate. But we can do just a little visualization. At the end, people would gather around in groups with affinity, and they would compose little verses. And by the end of 40 minutes, we had a song together. So we composed a really complex song, lyric wise, and with rich instrumentation too, because there's percussion, there are those harmonicas and flutes, and every kind of percussion instrument, and the guitar, people singing in chorus, people singing in different parts. In 40 minutes we had a song. So everyone, not myself, is a poet too. Hence, well, by liking to do this, I like to come up with these workshops, and I see that whenever I do that, people get inspired, and they also do the same. So if I'm an artist, you are too. So I'm on the practice of learning, and I believe that is really who am I. And if I am a musician, a poet, an artist today, and an apprentice, so are you, because we're all humans. So this is the first perspective, the first new humanist perspective that I want us to try together. You see, here is in this time of Zoom, uh, and a very wide group of workers and fellows and sisters here in Brazil, we got to participate and create together this movement called Sarawa. It, furthermore, I'll get that of what that means, but it was pretty much a workshop where we got the proof of concept that everyone is truly an artist, and we are doing our last and ending event this next Saturday. It's the sixth one actually. So 6 months doing that. So what that leave us? So that leaves us in the same place. So you know how I came here. You know what I've been through. I cannot give you my eyes. You cannot get inside me. Empathy does a lot, but not that far. And but by telling you where I am, maybe we can go side by side and try to learn something new. And this is the exercise. I'm not here to expose much. I want us to make an exercise. The father of bossa nova, who perished on last year, has a lot of folklorical elements to it. It has a lot of choro too, which is what some people will call the Brazilian jazz. There are some discussion around that, and samba, which is well one of the most famous rhythms in Brazil, genres in Brazil. So the MPB was conceived by two different and distinct groups in the 60s. Both the Centros Populares de Cultura, which means popular culture centers, that were like people on the middle class and the upper classes. They had access to study, to formal study of music, and they had access to good instrument, and they were looking for musical sophistication. So there was a time where that happened. In Brazil, there was no, and there's still in practice is still no musical education for everyone, and not even the slightest. So they were looking to this musical sophistication, but they are on the middle to top classes. And there was the National Union of Students, UNE, União Nacional de Estudantes, which had in their minds and hearts to keep the fidelity to revelry, to the events, to how culture manifested itself in Rio de Janeiro. And those two clashed a lot. There was a kind of struggle of forces between those two, but not for long. They wanted to create some sort of music that was representative of Brazil as a whole. And Brazil is a rather large country, so there's a lot of multiple characteristics to how culture manifests itself all around the territory. In 64, whilst this kind of conflict was going on, there came the military regime in Brazil. So this clash between both of this popular culture center and the National Union of Students started within a nationalist profile, which if we got what the speakers told us so far, and we got a little homework on neo-humanism too, we see that it's not that great of a thing. It builds towards something of formation of groups. But gradually, because of that clash, they start to make cohesion, and because of the scenario of the military regime, they start to gradually adopt different elements of culture that was being denied or prohibited by the military regime. So this is the scene of where MPB comes to be. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to expose a little bit of the biography of two authors or two artists. One is a person, the other one is a group, but it goes through of its creator too. and we'll try to listen and interpret uh, um, some of their songs and compositions, trying to bring to it that new humanist perspective. So we try to understand the context, and we try to go to that path of we are all human, we are all artists ourselves, and we will try to, uh, get the better out of it. So here, this first very important figure, and I'm starting with him, Gilberto Gil, because he's one of the main figures that popularized and made MPB what it is. So he was born in Salvador Bahia in 1942. So he's about 78 years now. And as a singer, multi-instrumentalist, musical producer, and also he acted as a politician in many different uh, scenes too. He was actually working for the UN. He acted as a minister of culture for 5 years in the last 20 years. And great inspirations and influences of his work are João Gilberto, the father of Bossa Nova, which I showed you just before. Castro Alves, Gonçalves Dias, and Olavo Bilac are poets, are writers that lived around the 19th century, 1960, something like that. And Olavo Bilac himself was the creator of the National Academy of Letters here in Brazil, which has both. All of these three, they were in a movement to bring romanticism to Brazil, and they had the effort to make literature go out to the people and in a new form. So they went to France and came back with all of that. So they are great influences on Gilberto's work. Also, very interesting, Gilberto Gil has a lot of prizes. One very important one, he was called the Peace Artist by UNESCO in 1999. So that's a long way to go from his 1942 birthplace. But he starts his career in the 60s when MPB rises. So he was 18 years old. And not long after that, he started to appear a lot on these shows on open television and on radio. And one very infamous show that he was appearing a lot was Chacrinha's show. And the kind of art, the kind of music that he propelled was very uh, was very authorial at first, but it clashed a lot with the kind of pressure that the military regime was trying to put in. So in '68, he ended up arrested because once doing this kind of movement with his art, he and his music, he with all together with Caetano, Maria Bethânia, and some others, they create a movement called Tropicalia. It's a movement inside MPB, and this movement itself gathered a lot of the characteristics of music that was being made in the US, that music that was being made in Europe, music that was being made by Hollywood, and gathered all of these elements and tried to make satire of those. At the same time, talking about the oppression and talking about how uh, there was a lot of prejudice to creating culture and to living freely in Brazil. So that was Tropicalia. And then he ended up arrested and exiled of Brazil for some years afterwards. But I'm not talking about this first phase of his, which is very militant. He faces, gives it to the man and such. I'm talking about work of his that came quite recently, which is called Gil Luminoso. uh, I don't know, a fitting translation might be Gil Enlightenment. He's a very spiritual person now, and that actually happens after he goes to some music expositions in Nigeria. And once he's there, he starts to see this matrix of African rhythms into infusing that into his music and seeing how important that was. And he starts to get more in contact with his spirituality and with working with people in a lovely manner and not only on a reactive manner. So a lot of these is shown in this work. It's a very mature work, and you see, so he was 60 and something and years old, and I'll show you a little bit of this. I'll show you the music. So the first one is this one. It's called "The Sound of the Person." Let me see.
A primeira pessoa soa como eu sou. A segunda pessoa soa como tu és. A terceira pessoa soa como ele e ela também. Qualquer pessoa soa. Toda pessoa boa soa bem.
Well, thankfully, this piece and most of the pieces in this album, they are very concise. They almost look like sutras because they are very short. The poet is very direct, and here it is fully. It's a music not made for radio because it has 1 minute and something, and pretty much what it's saying is, so the sound of the person, o som da pessoa, it's saying the first person sound as I am, the second person sound as you are, the third person sound as he is and she as well. Any person sounds, every person, good person sounds well too. So what might be extrapolated from here? So this is the first exercise. We're doing together 3, and then I want you to do 2 by yourselves when you have the time, if you so wish. So, if you wish to do so. He's doing a very nice play here of a grammar play, right? So first person, second person, third person, and she as well. So he's saying I, you, he, and she. That's very in your face. But he's ultimately speaking of how people sound, even though they are on different perspective. I am here, you are there, he and she are there. All of them sound good together. And he's putting that into the form of music. And the music itself is cyclical, which is very characteristical of African rhythms and mainly on African related religion and in Brazil too. They have this kind of rhythmic pattern to it that is very cyclical, very metrical for those who are used to this. So here are some of these notations. So you see, we did a little interpretation of what he said, what he says in the music, and this is an exercise for us to see the poetry behind of what a writer is giving us. And this is not what the radio wants us to do. This is not what the television wants us to do. This is not what the top 5 playlist of YouTube and Spotify want us to do. This is not what the algorithm and the companies, the record labels want us to see. This is appreciation of some material that you got to get in contact with after getting to know who you are listening to. So the person behind it. So another tune by Gilberto in the very same album. It's called Human Race.
A raça humana é uma semana do trabalho de Deus. A raça humana é uma semana do trabalho de Deus. A raça humana é a ferida acesa, uma beleza, uma podridão. O fogo eterno e a morte e a ressurreição.
And so he comes and sings it all again. So you see, there's just 2 verses again. It does look like a sutra. They look like shlokas. And it means the human race. So what he's saying is the human race is a week of God's work. The human race is the open wound, a grace, a rot, the eternal flame, and the death and resurrection. Some images come to mind here. So Brazil is mainly it's highly influenced by Christianism, and most of our African religion, they have a lot of syncretism, which means that they will relate to different cultures, and in order to hide uh, the divinities and the aspects that and the rites that they wanted to do in the past when there was slavery. And so he's talking here, the human race is a week of God's work. That, that image brings us to the biblical view of God, right? So 7 days, God made 7 days, and then he slept. And after that, he starts to bring us some kind of duality. So the human race is the open wound. So he counterposes that divinity of human race being God's work, but also is an open wound. So when he says that the human race is an open wound, for me, my interpretation that gets to me, is that the human being is divine in and out. If it's an open wound, it's divine both inside and outside. And that is proven when he says a grace or rot. A grace is the apex of your existence. It's the same thing, that it's the thing which is the best to have. Everything is a grace, right? When you feel love, when you feel compassion, when you feel that you're doing something good, all of that is grace, a state of grace. And a rot is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's the end of a said cycle. It's the end of something. And when he goes again and says, the eternal flame and the death, he again is counterposition in some aspects of life, death and resurrection. And then just after that, I'll go back to the first verse and we'll take a look at it. And we'll see that he says the human race is a week of God's work. And that's not the biblical saying at all, but it's just resembling at that. And in that small resemblance, it has the same kind of syncretism that African religion has with many of the symbols and rites they want to profess. So, a week is very symbolic, even in the Bible and in a lot of mystical senses. And, 7 days, seven is a number that has a lot of implications. And when he's talking about the human race is a week of God's work, it's like it's God's works made in 7 processes. And if you're going deep and try to understand the matrix, religious matrix of where it comes from, you start to see that he's not really talking about the biblical God. Pushing forward, 25 minutes in. So this is o Teatro Mágico, which means the magical theater. It was a group formed in 2003 in Osasco, São Paulo, by this guy in the middle with a pretty top hat here, Fernando Nitelli. So his family is also Christian, and his parents were teachers. They taught in the public system, and they had a very compassionate side to them. They use it to make soiris, which we call saraus here in Brazil. And soirée in French means a meeting in the night, and it's pretty much that. But actually, it's a meeting where you have kind of a stage or a place where people can go to and they can recite their poetry open. They can say something that comes to their mind. They can play a song. They can play a song for someone else. They can remain inside. They can do everything. It's a place where people are heard on the streets, or maybe on a pub, or maybe on a reading club, or maybe at someone's house. And it has happened for centuries. And it's a still very strong movement here in Brazil. And it is actually what we try to do with the Sarau online event. So his parents used it to do that a lot. And he wanted to bring that spirit of the soirée into the stage. So he wanted to have as many art forms as he could into the stage. So you see that the troupe here has anything but instruments. There's a lot of people, using, they look like they pretend in a circus or something. And the clip that I'm going to show actually is a clip. And you see there's a lot of theatrical stuff going on. They stop in the middle of the song to recite poetry, and the music goes on. They stop in the middle of something to tell a story. They stop. They don't stop. They keep going on, making political statements in the middle of everything, at the same time retaining folklorical aspects of the music made here in Brazil, and and with that appropriation of stuff that comes from the outside, trying to make it as identitary to so that he can relate to people here, putting on a language that people can speak here, but not in the sense of being extremely nationalist. On the contrary, he wants to pertain to that field of art and to that field of understanding of people without any kind of barrier. So the public of the main people that watch and follow this band, that they are kind of avant-garde in some stuff, in some way of doing music and selling music. That there is not a specific niche. It's difficult to find a niche. So you have young people, you have old people, you have people that like rock and roll, you have people that like samba, and all of that mix it in together. You have people that like folklore, you have our aunts and everything else. Their success starts when they do this album called Entrada para Raros, Entry for the Rare, and it's actually inspired by a book that Fernando read called Der Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, and the what he tried to do, they tried to do on this album was really that. So they wanted the rare to come in, and who were the rare? Everyone. So everyone is unique, everyone is rare, you are one of a kind. And they did it by themselves with help of the public. So they started doing shows and they wanted to do the record, but they started this crowdfunding at the time. It was something that was coming up, and they did not want to keep tied to record labels because, as said before, record labels, they kind of manipulate what is going through and being shown on TV, what being shown on the radio. Radio and TV here in Brazil are public concessions. There are particular ones too. There are endeavors, but there are public concessions. And how come that record labels and producers dominate the field of radio and TV with specific and marketed products of culture to make people consume that more and more and more and more, and the music that the people want is not necessarily played on the radio. So there are tunes that have been played over and over and over and over without any consent of the public. So they wanted to do the other way around. So that's why they call their movement of free arts. So I'll show a little clip of them right now.
Where's the door frame with the knocking?
Cena sutileza que reside a exuberância. Busco nos ideais do amor. Liquidificar as relações. Não mais valia quem de pé ficar. Se a luta acomoda, diga quem nos tira. Quem viver provará. Nossa emancipação. Nossa emancipação. Nossa.
Oh, thanks. I was muted for a second. Yeah, so I love the song, and it's quite the piece. The name of the song is Quando a Fé Ruge. That could be translated as When Faith Roars, but Fé Ruge if you're not reading it, ferrugem is a derivative of the word ferro, which is iron, and also would mean rust. So they make this little intricate wordplay of faith roars and rust. And pretty much what they're saying on this music is how this search for the soul and heart, for the essence, for subtleness, uh, juxtaposed to the system, which is very iron-like and hence rusting, uh, is something to be thrived for, is something to be fought after. So I'll try to make quick work of what we have here. Well, a really big image that comes to me when I listen to this song is that movie by Chaplin, Modern Times. Maybe because I have a former degree on business administration, and I must have watched this movie about 10 times. But what he says mostly is, if it is on subtleness that resides exuberance, I search for resonance in the ideals of love. They're made liquid, liquefied, the relations of the labor. There is no more added value. There's agony. There is fear. When he's saying, if it is in subtleness that resides exuberance, I search for resonance in the ideals of love. I look for resonance in the ideals of love. He's kind of making a question. If it is in subtleness, I will do that. and and then he gets himself to a point where he sees that all that rock, all the thing that is very static, the system is kind of melting away, made liquid. The relations of labor, there is no more added value. Added value is a concept that Marx brings, and he'll say about that value that is added by the worker after he has meet his quota. So after that, by living on this system, there's no added anything. There's only agony and fear, and there's no more this resonance with being closed into the system. And then he comes to say, who will stand up if the fight accommodates itself? Who will tell us what to do? Only those who live will prove our emancipation. So I have nothing to comment on that. And then he does this wordplay, which is really interesting, and it fits inside of the poetry of Portuguese, because there are two verses. Quando a ferrugem no meu coração dilata, verse 2, é quando a ferrugem e o meu coração dilata. For those who maybe don't speak Portuguese, they might have sound the same, but I tell you, those who speak Portuguese think that they sound the same too. And what he says mostly is, rust on my tin heart exists. Faith roars, my heart expands. So when there is rust on my tin heart, it is when faith roars and my heart expands. So it is within this collapsed system, this very iron-like but rotting environment, that the heart itself finds it suppressed in such a manner that it has no option but to expand itself. And then he goes and says a lot of other things. I'll try to jump off to the exercise that I promised everyone. So here are two links. I had the great privilege to share two of the tunes that I came to download this year of pandemics, which are Eternal Child and Every Teacher. It's a he and a she. In Portuguese, we would have gender for those words. And they are on Gurukul YouTube, and maybe they are going through the program as well. I have already commented on them with the lyrics and with with some kind of translation to English. And the exercise I would like to do after we've gone through this exposition of ours is to, since you started to know a little bit about the perspective in which we are in, I won't say I, and you have the song there, try to make an interpretation of it. Try to listen to it in your place at your own time and leisure, and try to feel what it tells you musically, what it tells you with the lyric, with the poetry, and try to come up with something after it. Draw something, do your own poetry about it. Make notations of it like I did. or maybe do your own stuff based on that. And if you so feel like, which would be really nice, share it, comment on the video. And I think this it would be a good usage of the resources we have at hand, which is technology and the time that we have, so that we don't stick too much on Zoom. And maybe when we start to think about the perspective of others and trying to bring that into our own beings and translating into the way we feel to the world, we'll finally reach a place where we can call sama-sama. So thank you so much. Sorry for extending a little bit of my time. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Still working on the technical stuff with Zoom. Thank you so much for that presentation, Enrique. It was really lovely to hear and see examples of neo-humanism. We're gonna continue with that now. Our next presenter is Igo Amin. He is an audiovisual educator, transmedia artist, and director of films found on education, audiovisuals, and nature. He is the founder of Instituto Mundos and a partner as well as director of Co-Creativa. He is also an interdisciplinary master in human sciences at UFVJM in education, culture, and society. So I turn it over now to you, Igo.
Namaskar. Good night. I'm Indrajit, my spiritual name, and my name is Igor Amin, my social name. I'm from Brazil, from the top of a mountain in the Vale do Jequitinhonha, in the state of Minas Gerais. I am an audiovisual educator, and for more than 15 years, I work with children in schools with workshops and film projects. I teach and learn from them, and my main role today is to lead a community of audiovisual educators called What Do You Wish for the World? Are you right on chat our website for you connect with us? I would like a lot to connect with all children around the world with our project. And if you'd like our work, you can connect with us. So, a moment. Okay. I have already produced films for children. I traveled the world to promote my work in cinema. I met incredible people who are present here and now. I will tell you a little about my work, okay? Today's goal. My goal here today is to say the importance that we teachers or artists, educators, can become an example for children. On the first day of school, I like to introduce myself using creativity to touch the hearts of children. As I work with audiovisual education, I like to tell her stories and introduce myself at this moment. On the first day of class, I always try to use my creativity to talk about neo-humanistic education and then say what are the values and that I believe, who I am, what do I want for the world. So these two questions very important for me to communicate with children. Who I am, very important in the first day of the class, no? And what I wish for the world, what my values. I always try to connect an humanistic perspective with audiovisual things. So I had opportunity to produce feature films, TV series in Brazil, and now for me the most important neo-humanistic values for is four values, four ideas for me is very important. The educator as an example, for me this is very important in my work and the things that I believe. And education based on values and ethics. The second thing. The third thing is teach and learn about our own culture. So Henrique, my friend, my Brazilian friend that I was in some workshops and these things, told about Gilberto Gil and our culture. So we have another kind of cultures like the indigenous culture. We have 300 more than 300 groups of indigenous people in Brazil, and our culture is very, very important. And it's very, very sophisticated. And but if you think between the importance of our culture and the universal culture, no? So our culture in Brazil is a universal culture too, no? And the four values, four importance, neo-humanistic values for me in my work with cinema and media and transmedia storytelling is expansion love for all beings. Expansion love for me is the principal things to work with audiovisual narratives and audiovisual stories. So I'm very happy to talk with you, with 100 people interested in neo-humanistic educational. I'm very happy. Thank you a lot. So, what is the best way to educate children in the world of screens? I have an idea, I have a conception that we have a world of screens, no? And children live in these worlds too. So what is the best way to educate children in the world of screens? So this is my research. I had a master that I researched this question, And for me, the principal things to educate children in the screen worlds is connect with love and without fear. So with love and without fear is very important to work with technology today for me. We cannot be afraid of screens because adults have a lot of fear of screens. What the problem of this what the problem of screens? The problem is people in the most part of the time is adults and adultocentrism, no, in Portuguese. Complex this context because the problem is not the screen. The problem is people between the screens, okay? And our values, our proposal, our approach to use medias to educate children. And in humanistic perspective, we need to connect some values to work together with media. And I try every day to do this. We can use them. We cannot be afraid of screens, okay? We can use them as a means of expand love. I believe a lot about this conception. Use screens as a means to expand love. Okay. We can think about the possibilities to expand medias, expand narratives, expand experiences, and the concept of expand is an humanistic strategies to work with children and media too. To expand love is to create a practice of a supra-aesthetic science, what Pierre Sarkar mentioned as the goal of artistic expression. Baba emphasized the importance of this concept of supra-aesthetic science, in Portuguese, ciência supraestética. And I have attention a lot if all the things that I produce for children and with children to promote autonomy and a lot of things connect with this idea of supraesthetic science to expand the field of individual expression in art and media and connect with expansion consciousness, with a consciousness. The individual go to a consciousness, expanded consciousness. The importance of art as a social work tool. So Pierre Sarkar told a lot for us about the importance of the expand the expression and connect with a social work. So for me to start a project with media and connect education and media needs to put these two things together. The possibilities to supraesthetic experiences and connect with a social work, okay? The word creation in Portuguese is criação. Criação is criação. Ação in Portuguese is action. So when we talk about criação, I can connect with two words, create and action. So for me, criação is a process, creation is a process to put creativity in action. And action for me is a social work, okay? I'm more secure now to talk. So creative connect to creation is putting our imagination into action. I repeat, put our imagination into action. I work with transmedia storytelling because the word represents the idea of supra-aesthetic for me is trans, the prefix trans, as if it were a supramedia. Imagine the concept of supramedia. Things like transcend media. What the possibility to transcend media? Transcend media with our values, okay? With our neomanistic values. How we can transcend media and education and the form of education with our neomanistic values. So this is an important question for me. The abilities of art and the media to transcend their technological limits. So I'm not usually to talk a lot about these complex things like education, art, media, and spiritual journal. So for me, it's four things very complex: art, media, education, and spiritual journal. So I prefer to present. I prefer present for you an example, and that how I do this in my routine with children in schools and these things. So I'd like to see if have a okay. Can you hear me? Can you see my video? Okay. Can you write on a chat?
Yes, I see typing. I can hear you just fine and see you well.
I like to do this. So before to start my example, my performance, my art media performance, I'd like to invite you to put your hand in your screen, and when I will play a sound, you move your screen. You move because you have more power than technology have in your life. Okay, so let's go. Okay, now I feel that I have more power than the screen have in me. A moment. So, are you start a story? Okay, I will finish in 5 minutes, and I would like to talk. I would like to tell a story with you. A moment. Once upon a time, there was a robber. This robber called Italo. I am Italo. Okay? The robot was called Italo. His body and hair were made of wood, and his thoughts are pure imagination. The hawk had Hobbit. The hawk had Hobbit had been burned on the edge of river full of stones. His classmates did not ask him to play at school just because he was different. He felt alone, and so he started to meditate. Inside was a bird that calmed him down and sang a song for him. This is a bird. Inside was a bird that calmed him down and sang the song for him. He felt that love present in all things when he heard the Chisuru bird singing on this mental screen. The bird told him that if he ever chanted this mantra, his stone head would turn into a brilliant crystal. And that was how the stonehead robber decided to sing every day. Are you ready? Are you ready to hear the mantra?
Yes.
Bhavana Kevala, Bhavana Kevala, Bhavana Kevala, Bhavana Kevala, Bhavana Kevala, Bhavana Kevala.
Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala. Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala. Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala. Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala, Pavanam Kevala. From Pitava Ki Jai.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Igor. You guys can hear me, right? Sometimes my
Yes, we
mic
can.
comes in and out. Okay, great. So thank you so much for that presentation. It was so fun to, see what you do. And yeah, it gave us all inspiration, I'm sure. So next up is a written statement from Dr. Michael Towsey. He is currently traveling in the outback of Australia right now. So he asked me to read something on his behalf. He is a senior research fellow at Charles Sturt University and at the Queensland University of Technology in Australia. He says, "Hello from Australia. I want to talk about the relationship between neo-humanism and science. I am motivated by a recent article written by Sohail Inayatollah about the increasing role of conspiracy theories in polluting public discourse. There is much that could be said about conspiracy theories, but suffice to say that they range from those that have an air of plausibility, the anti-vax arguments, to those that are completely bonkers, that human civilization is controlled by shape-shifting reptilian aliens. The main message of this talk, however, is that there is a close relationship between neo-humanism and science, and that all social policy must rest on the twin foundations of neo-humanist values and science. The connection with conspiracy theories is that in order to fight them, we need the values of neo-humanism as much as we need the rationality of science. And closer to home, in my experience, some of the parents who send their children to neo-humanist schools are quite susceptible to conspiracy theories and can spread their confusion to other parents and teachers. So I would add that not just social policy in general, but neo-humanist pedagogy in particular needs to rest on the twin foundations of neo-humanism and science. To justify this statement, we must turn to neoethics. It's my belief that the two principles of neoethics are not talked about much in the neo-humanist literature, mostly because Sarkar expressed them in quite difficult language that is not part of everyday discourse. But I have recently come to understand that they are hugely important. In simple language, the first principle of neoethics concerns the spiritual goal of life, and the second concerns the necessary conditions to attain that goal. What Sarkar has done is to raise the yogic concept of subjective approach through objective adjustment to supreme ethic. Neoethics has the same overarching status in neo-humanism as the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, has in Christian ethics. And the universal rule, act only on that maxim through which you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law, has in Kantian ethics. The following metaphor is helpful to understand the relationship between the two principles of neoethics. Suppose I want to sail from Australia across the Pacific Ocean single-handed. My goal is to sail under the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco Bay. On the way, I'm obliged to monitor winds and currents and make continual adjustments to sails and rudder. My goal is singular, but to achieve it, I must draw upon thousands of years of maritime science. The science itself does not give me a goal or direction, but once my goal is chosen, it helps me to sail efficiently in my desired direction. In framing social policy, we must have a clear idea about direction and goal. Science cannot provide this. Neo-humanist philosophy and practice give us a goal, and neo-humanist values provide signposts. But once the direction is clear, science provides crucial assistance. It is true that science has its difficulties. It is prone to cultural, gender, and political bias. But just as we do not reject values because they can be difficult to live by, nor should we reject the rationality of science because it is difficult to get around bias. The twin pillars of neo-humanist values and science both require struggle. Note, just to be clear, I'm adopting a broad definition of science. It is the process by which we give rational consideration to multiple sources of evidence. Actually, this definition is too broad, since it also includes what happens in a court of law. An additional condition is that the mission of science is to elucidate cause and effect in the observable world. To fight conspiracy theories, scientific rationality is not enough. We need to expose their values in the light of neo-humanism. Typically, conspiracy theories exploit fear and destroy trust. They are the modern equivalent of the medieval witch hunt. We need to ask questions such as, does this conspiracy theory promote one human society? Does it promote the humanist values of justice, fairness, equity, dignity, courtesy, and respect? Only in this way can we retain moral clarity in an increasingly confusing world. Thank you for listening. And with that, we are pretty much right at time. I can't speak for my other presenters, but I can say that I will stay on for a few minutes and you can type to me in the chat any questions that you may have, because I know that we have a little musical or performance interlude happening now. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of my co-presenters and to all of you for joining us this evening as we learned how to promote neo-humanism in science, the arts, and media. Thank you so much.